exponential sort of trend. So it is really, really hard to predict the next things. However, one of the things that we know is that we're moving from the typical machine learning sort of style, which is that we have a lot of data and then we train the data and we get answers. So there is nothing new. Everything is about communicating the data that we have collected in a more sophisticated way. So it's a tool to something like deep learning or even AGI in a few years' time. I believe that will come sooner than later. So that will change the whole perspective. So just that on the time frame of how things will be changing. So it's good actually that you have this kind of talks and seminars, because people need to be aware 100% that things will change dramatically, the whole landscape in the next few years. So now, coming back to the actual question about the urban environments, I believe that urban environments is one of the best applications for artificial intelligence as a whole, because they are very complex systems. So urban environments are systems of systems, right? We all know that. So there are millions and billions of information that we can sort of like change and get different answers. And a classic sort of like experienced engineer that is designing a system within that system of systems will have quite a lot of experience, will have a lot of like reasoning as a human being. And by using today's, say, digital tools, can make a few very good decisions. But what AI and machine learning is giving us is that opportunity to now, as I said at the beginning, train those algorithms with that information and find more solutions, more alternative solutions. So the influence of the decisions can be significant based on the machine learning. And I'm saying the influence, I'm not saying that machine learning will make the decisions for us, just because machine learning doesn't really have that reasoning yet. So just to conclude that, I believe that although we are testing machine learning algorithms for the design of urban environments as a whole, and we do get a lot of architects and engineers, they have tested them, and we do get very reliable and say information and decisions and outcomes that they make sense. Absolutely, most of the case they're still not 100% reliable. So think about it like this: we are using machine learning at the moment for getting some ideas, for summarizing reports, for getting a better understanding, but we don't really use it as a tool to tell us what to do. So we haven't replaced lawyers, we haven't replaced engineers, we haven't replaced mathematicians with AI at the moment. So the reliability, although it's good, it's still not at the level that it should be. That's in order to be able to have an autonomous, let's say, AI system. So that is where we are going in the next few years. So in the next few years, we're moving from the machine learning. So it's an artificial intelligence umbrella, then it's called the machine learning, and we're now moving to the deep learning, which is having that kind of reasoning. It's having the capacity to filter information and add that experience that algorithms don't have, the experience that human beings have at the moment. So
yeah,
that's
that's really insightful. Do you think it's going to be positive or negative? I know that's a particularly sort of, it's not going to be black and white, but
yeah,
by reaching something which is more human-like in its ability to make decisions, do you think you'll get to a point where that will positively or negatively influence our urban landscape?
I think overall the impact of AI and machine learning in urban environments and in other sort of like systems can, as long as it's implemented correctly and is regulated, can only be positive. Think about it like 20 years ago, we had 3D design come in. Up until then, draftsmen were just when I studied at the university. I studied I was drawing on a piece of paper, and then it was AutoCAD 2D, and then the 3D designs, and now all these different software. Yes, the work of the draftsman has changed a lot. Many more people can now design a lot of interesting stuff. They look almost realistic with fine details. But we haven't moved to something negative. I would say the overall change is positive. So if we treat AI and machine learning in this way, it will make a positive impact. But in order to treat it in this way, more and more people, they have to understand it. The problem is that now it's the very beginning of the mass AI, as I call it, like that everybody knows now the AI, and everybody knows Jeff Hinton, and everybody the godfather of AI, and everybody knows now like a ChatGPT, and they have played with those tools. So now we have to really understand it. And actually, the project, I'm at the university, an academic, but the project that I'm leading, the one you've mentioned before, the AI large city, for building management in particular, that is the whole idea about it, is to bring closer the engineers with the AI scientists, because we have realized that these two, they have no clue what the others are doing. So AI scientists, they have no clue about engineering, like nothing, absolutely nothing. You tell them how the traffic light system works and they don't get it. And then you have on the other side the engineers that have no clue about how an AI algorithm looks like. So we're trying to bring them close to make sure that we will have that positive impact in the near future.
Yeah, no, that's really valuable. It's true, you need to have both sides of domain and digital working together. Celine, I wanted to ask you how you think AI machine learning will influence our urban environments throughout the next 5 years. It doesn't have to be sort of anything specific, but a general positive or negative trend. What do you think?
Yeah, sure. I think I like to maybe set the scene a little bit, just in terms of urban development and I guess the insertion of technology in urban development. I think a lot of us obviously working in the infrastructure are aware of this, but the UN has predicted that by 2050, 2/3 of the global population will be living in cities, and that population growth will be characterized by a lot of different pressures and challenges, environmental concerns, pressures on utilities and urban service provision, traffic congestion. And so I guess we've seen, over the past 20 maybe years, growing presence of the use and impact of data and the computational power of that data to sort of address these challenges. And I think it's quite clear, as Kostas has said, that digital solutions are or can be an enabler in resolving a lot of these urban planning challenges. There's so much potential for these digital technologies to improve our urban environments, digital twins to facilitate more connectivity, air quality monitoring, smart street lighting, smart parking. So it's clear that the use of technology to collect and analyze data on people's lives can be really powerful. I would maybe be slightly skeptical about the narrative behind smart cities, and particularly around, yes, it's great that computer scientists and engineers are sort of working together and collaborating to address some of these issues, but I would be slightly skeptical or worried maybe if the narrative around smart cities was only sort of controlled by computer scientists and engineers, because I guess it can be dangerous in terms of if we're not thinking enough about what are the principles behind data collection, who is actually collecting that data, and who's making the decisions behind how that data is being used. Sorry, it can lead to, I guess, a prioritization of all of these different challenges based on, well, what data is available, what's our ability to measure and collect data on people's lives, on urban practices, on each of these problems. And it can be slightly exclusionary, I guess, if the issues being addressed are only the issues on which data can be collected. So I guess the main thing for me, yes, it can be positive, but also a big risk in terms of, are the physical inequalities that exist on the ground, are those being replicated as emissions in the data sets being used? That'll be my main point.
Awesome, yeah, we definitely need sort of social infrastructure data included, as well as just the classic engineering, urban planning information that you have in sort of the Internet of Things and smart cities. So now we're going to move on quickly to the second topic, which is how will the use of AI machine learning improve the sustainability in urban environments? And will the computational resource used to achieve this be recoverable in the savings made? Because there's huge questions at the moment about how much resource and compute data centers take up and where they are around the world, and whether or not those locations will be able to survive in the future in terms of they need to be really cold, and will the world stay that level of cold? So can the use of AI and machine learning, even though it is computationally intensive, hopefully create an environment where sustainability is a priority? I don't know if Kostas, you'd like to go first on that one.
Yeah, so that's a very, very tricky question indeed, because anything we are doing at the moment, it does add to the computational resources requirements that we've got. So if I was just a pure advocate of AI without even thinking, I would say that I believe that the very advanced AGI models of the future will manage this by themselves. So they will try to sort it out and reduce the amount of energy that they require in order to run those kind of algorithms with billions and billions of parameters, and compress the data in the way that the ChatGPT and GPT-4 is doing it at the moment, but at a greater extent, and with this way manage to use less energy. But of course, we are not there yet. And indeed, this is something, I guess, that it has to be picked up from the legislative and the ethical perspective as well. As a scientist myself, as an engineer working at the university, I always believe that innovation comes first. And once we prove that that is the right way to go, then the legislation should come second. Not with a huge gap, but you have to let the research first make the innovation and then start legislating, rather than putting barriers at the very, very beginning. But that's my personal view, and I don't believe that everybody should have the same view at the end of the day. So think about it like this: when it comes to energy, and even because you've mentioned that it increases the temperatures, in fact, having all these cloud computing out there. In terms of a computational resources, energy that we spend, even let's put it like as costs that we spend, I think AI as a whole can be used in many other ways where we can actually save costs. So if we were talking about the urban environment, that there are a lot of initiatives, government initiatives, especially in the US, where they are using AI in order to track lost revenues from specific governmental institutions, tax savings and all that. So they can apply AI in other forms, in other ways, in order to make sure that the available resources and the savings made for the development, the further development, the continuous development, if you like, of the AI. So again, the whole idea is that you have the infrastructure, which includes the societal guidelines, the ethical guidelines, the legislative, and then you bring them all together and you're trying to make a holistic positive impact. That's my perspective. We should not just look at the AI as a technology, and as you alluded to before, it's more like as a is the whole system, the ecosystem of AI and what comes with it. So again, a kind of a positive response that yes, the computational resources can be recoverable at the end of the day, with some more thinking that we need to do in the very, very near future.
No, that's super interesting. Celine, what are your 2 cents on how we use AI and machine learning to improve sustainability in urban environments? I don't know if you have a different perspective.
Yeah, I'm not sure I can speak to this sort of computational resource or recoverability of the savings in terms of energy use or computational power of AI. But I think definitely within urban environments, that should be the goal, right? That should be why we're using technology and why we're using all of this data to sort of help cities become more sustainable, and real-time analytics and the predictive power of AI can definitely and is already helping a lot of city officials in different parts of the world reduce greenhouse gas emissions, conserve energy, and reduce waste. And managing water resources as well, which is a critical aspect of sustainability. I am really glad that you asked me for a definition of sustainability for this, because I'd like to talk more to, I guess, the social and economic aspects of it. I know that we focus a lot on environmental sustainability a lot of the time, but you can't necessarily achieve that, or you can't ignore, I guess, the other aspects of it as well. So again, focusing on, I guess, the way that data is being used and the way it's produced. I've just seen a question in the chat from Shields. I don't know if we're supposed to be addressing the questions in the chat yet, but I think it's a very sort of topical question on this subject. Who is controlling the AI? Are we heading for each company or local authority to have their own version? Ideally, in my opinion, that data and those data sets and those decisions would be made in a collaborative way. So obviously including the engineers, the computer scientists, municipal and city officials in those decisions, but really importantly, local communities as well. Is the data being co-produced? Are residents of the city aware and consenting to the data being collected on them and their activities? Are there sort of monitoring and learning initiatives in place to evaluate whether and how people's quality of life has actually been improved or affected? I think that's the sort of smart cities for me will be successful if they enable improved decision making and governance for city officials. But again, there's that risk of sort of how can you trust that data in the first place? So sort of making sure that all of the principles behind the collection in the first place are in place.
Yeah, I think that almost. Oh yeah, jump in.
Can I just mention something, because I see also the question and Celine also mentioned it. So when it comes to the whole, like who manages that data kind of thing, we should not forget that the whole idea is that at the beginning, before even internet, everything was decentralized, like local governments, everybody had their own data, their own passports and stuff, like you could not share anything. The whole idea of the internet was to centralize all that information, so then everybody has access within that cloud that calls internet. Okay, it's called internet. Now, the idea of Web3, I don't know how many of you are aware of what is coming, which is Web3, that is where the AI algorithms run, is where the blockchain runs and all that, is that we are again decentralizing the information. So although the information lives on the cloud, nobody has access but you. So you are creating, we have our own data, we have our own certification systems, our own means of accessing that information, and nobody else can access but you. So that's at least the idea of where we are going. We're not going in a superior version of today's internet where all the information, but all, will be there. It's actually the opposite.
I didn't know that. That's really cool, but also slightly scary that we gained access to so much stuff, and now slowly, one by one, it's being sort of taken back in a way. I also thought this would roll quite nicely onto a question from Jackie, which sort of takes a step back a little bit and says, what are a few examples of how AI could be used in an urban environment? What could it potentially do other than sort of use of data? I thought you would probably be a really good person to answer that question, Kostas.
So how?
It's just some examples of use of AI in urban environments, sort of set the scene a little bit, I think.
Yeah. So I mean, in our hub application that was shortlisted, and now we're going to the second stage, the 12 million applications you've mentioned, Isabel, at the beginning. That is, we have more than 70 companies. I have numerous examples to present. We have companies that they are collecting 1 billion of data points annually from the performance of buildings, but it's so much information that they cannot really process that data and helps them make sophisticated, comprehensive solutions, and create tools that people can use. That is from energy performance. We have companies that they're dealing with traffic lights, traffic light systems. I mean, it's not, the traffic light system is a big example, because if you manage to have a live traffic light system that is changing based on the traffic available, then you can create a city that never have traffic issues. And you can lower the CO2 emissions, and you can even sort of control, but in a nice way, in a good way. It's not that controlling who is going to move and who's not, but it's controlling a little bit the routes of the people, just to make sure that all the positive alternatives are used. We're kind of doing that now anyway. I mean, Google is using a lot of AI, and we do it. But think about more of an autonomous system that is, again, is not just getting information and giving you a solution, which is the machine learning, because that information is trained and then gives you a solution, but is putting also the element of reasoning in that. So it makes it is self-improved. So it is improving by itself based on the decisions and the success of the decision that is making every time. So in the construction sector, I mean, our hub, the AI hub for large cities, is mainly, as I said, focused on building per se, but we have 5 different themes, from the design of buildings to management, operational management of the buildings. Third theme, if I remember well, is the maintenance and rehabilitation of buildings. Then is the deconstruction of buildings, like better deconstruction practices, and all the way to reusability of building components. So all of these at the moment is done. Some of them are done at a greater extent, some of them at a lower, but overall everything is based on a limited amount of data and experience, I would say. I mean, we can only use great experience to make good decisions, which is not the ideal if we want to improve in a more accelerated, in a more fast manner. Yeah, I don't know if these examples covered, but the question, but I can give more if you want to.
Yeah, no, I think that's great. Thank you. That sort of sets the scene. I don't know if Celine, if you have any examples you'd like to share, or if we should move on to question number 3, let me know.
Yeah, sure. I think because I saw a couple of questions in the chat as well about concerns around, I guess, accuracy of data and trusting the data. When I was doing my master's, the research I did on data in urban settings was very much around, I was looking at, so just talking about that rise in sort of urban populations across the world, 90% of that increase is taking place in Asia and Africa. And so I looked at specifically African cities in terms of their smart city initiatives. And I think for me, was a really interesting context because in a lot of African cities, I looked at Nairobi in particular, but the majority of economic activities happening in those cities are informal, which means that I guess by definition, there's no data on them and they're invisible in that sense to urban planners. So I studied a few different initiatives around, I guess, how urban planners and researchers were, I guess, trying to go around that problem. So in terms of transport planning, there is a formal public transport network in Nairobi, but in practice, the millions of Nairobi residents day to day use a semi-formal network of like minibuses called matatus that are run by hundreds of diverse private operators. And so there wasn't, I guess, a systems-wide map, route maps or stop locations or schedules or anything like that, which is very limiting for both users and transport planners in opposition to, for example, cities like London, where all of this information is expected of operators for them to integrate that information with technology and better, and I guess plan their decisions in real time. So what this group of researchers did in Nairobi was use geolocative data from mobile phones to collect that sort of transit data that individuals were doing day to day, and they turned those data sets into a common format for public transport schedules to better predict the actual transit needs of Nairobi's population. So what is the data? How can we capture data outside of formal networks, outside of sort of administrative official data? How can we look for alternative sources of data that is maybe more accurate and actually reflects what people are doing and how they're living day to day? And this was actually really successful, and they ended up integrating this new, I guess, transit map onto Google Maps, and it was the first ever informal transit system to be uploaded onto Google Maps, which was obviously really helpful for a lot of people. And they made this data open source as well for anyone to use. So it has been used by different urban planners, different startups involved in transit initiatives across the city. And yeah, I guess the sort of involvement of different stakeholders during the development of that data, but also, I guess, thinking about where that data comes from. I think it seems to have created a lot of trust in the accuracy of that data and demand for its use, I guess. And they managed to establish stronger data sharing principles across urban planning practices. So that would be, I think, for me, a very interesting example from the Kenyan perspective, but I think a lot of lessons for the rest of the world as well.
Yeah, no, that's awesome. You can definitely trust the data if you know it comes from individuals and who've consented to the use of it. So quickly running.
That's the whole point. That is the whole point of the discussion. Sorry that I'm interrupting, but that's the whole thing. At the moment, we need good data to train the machine learning algorithms, right? And because these algorithms, they're just trained on those data. The more data we have statistically, the more these algorithms will be trained. But the whole idea is that we move into, researchers have already moved into all these proposals that we're making. It's about deep learning, not machine learning. So the whole idea is that the algorithms themselves, they train themselves and they ignore the bad data. So we will be using only the right data. So instead of actually asking people to find the right data, the same algorithms, they will be trained on trillions and trillions of data, and they will find out which one is the right, which one is the wrong ones. Now, of course, with that comes to the training process, like how much and who is involved into the training process of the algorithms. That's one thing. And the second is, of course, if we allow those algorithms to take power of the decision making. Not really the training process, but the decision making is the problem. And this is where the legislation comes into that.
Awesome. Do you think we have time to go on to question number 3? If we do a speed run, and then hopefully some people can have a chance to turn their camera and ask some questions too. But if you guys could do a quick few sentences on how will the use of machine learning and AI improve our safety in cities, and could this be achieved without loss of individual liberty? I think it's a really interesting question and worth at least a few sentences. If you've,
I'll let Celine start first to lead that, because I think I'm talking quite a lot.
Yeah, sure. I think it's quite clear what the potential benefits to safety in cities is with the use of AI and generative AI by collecting a lot of data from a lot of different sources, sensors and cameras to identify, I guess, patterns and trends that humans can't necessarily detect. I think particularly a lot of potential around women's safety in cities with smart street lighting. But again, it's the governance piece for me, the data governance piece, that's really critical to determining, I guess, how can we achieve that balance between ensuring people's safety by relying on this technology, but also thinking about, well, how do we ensure that I saw a few questions in the chat, or comments in the chat as well, about individual liberty and freedoms, and I guess the danger of falling into authoritarianism, or I guess mass surveillance. So I think a very good example that I guess I was kind of thinking about, people may have heard about, I guess, the protests against the 15-minute city initiatives in Oxford. So the local council, I think, required residents to have a permit to where they were working in the city, and limiting the number of times that they could drive across different boundaries of that allocated 15-minute zone. And if you don't comply with that, or if you, I guess, drive through without, or ignoring that 15-minute zone, then the city's automatic number plate recognition systems would automatically levy a £70 fine or something on those residents. So obviously I think there was a bit of controversy around, what are the benefits versus drawbacks of that initiative. But I think it's very interesting and definitely very reasonable for residents to think about the methods in which these fines are being imposed. How can we establish norms and regulatory measures and, I guess, standards to safeguard people's individual liberties, but still balancing that with, the obvious benefits that AI and smart city technologies can bring. I saw something about decentralized approaches in the chat as well to training machine learning, which definitely can help with data privacy, for example. But yeah, I don't have an answer to this question. It's a difficult one. A lot of things to think about.
Yeah, I think policymakers, urban planners, and technologists, tech industry, let's say, will have to work together in shaping how these technologies will be integrated in the cities in the coming years. But there is a potential, that these kind of technology can decrease the bias that at the moment human beings have got, and there is quite a lot of discrimination. So if they do it in the right way, the bias will be less, because now it's like we're all in a common sort of ground, and I'm not talking about being sort of like led by what the algorithms will say, but I'm saying that it will be easier to spot issues and rectify them, find a solution, even find a solution into the legislation, like proposed solutions that can improve the way that legislation it is executed. Because at the moment, from country to country, legislation is executed in a very different way, and I don't believe that is fair to everyone, especially for some countries around the world, right? So that is the kind of the issue or issues that AI can improve the situation, and that comes into what Celine said before about the 15-minute city and like sort of like how things will run in the future. But indeed, it is a very difficult question to answer at that early on stage.
Thank you very much. I was just going to jump on over to the question section and say, Andy, I don't know if you wanted to elaborate a little bit more on your lessons, what that could be taken from the building blocks of society, if you're still on the call. Or you're on mute.
It's not very helpful. Yeah, just firstly to say, I just really enjoyed listening in, and clearly your passion from all three of you is like coming through in spades. So just really engaging on a Friday lunchtime, and great to see so many people dialing in. I mean, I was just reflecting. I am definitely not a historian in any way, but I guess often when we look at sort of the prospect of change going forward, that there's always guidance by what's happened in the past, and I just wonder in terms of how the fabric of society has developed over time. And clearly, in different places around the world, that's happened in different ways, and it's quite a subjective thing in terms of where people of where society and the fabric of society is quite diverse. But I do think that there must be some guiding sort of principles around, what we perhaps collectively think we like in, whether it's in the UK or in Europe or in a Western society, that can absolutely keep us on the straight and narrow, because invariably people understand and they accept change, but it's got to be in sync with what the sort of what is intrinsic within them. So I think just looking at it like that would be helpful. But again, just thanks to all three of you for really engaging conversation.
Awesome. I don't know if either of you two have any final closing comments based on that, sort of looking at the past, look forward to the future.
Yeah, I can go. No, I think that was a really good point made by Andy and Kostas to a certain extent earlier as well, about comparing different ways governments operate across the world. Some governments are more or less authoritarian, and I've lived in China and in Singapore, where we're not necessarily given a voice in terms of what data is collected, not even just a voice, but even made aware of what data is collected on whom. So definitely, I think for me the bottom line with smart city technologies and the way that these technologies are used to sort of change the way a city is planned should very much, like I said, involve collaboration with as many stakeholders as possible, but also the way those initiatives are evaluated. Is it actually helping people? Are people seeing that change in their day-to-day lives? And are people given the agency to sort of co-create those solutions with, the different technology providers, their local government? But is the technology itself also sort of improving their agency to sort of make decisions around their daily city lives?
Yeah, my final point would be that I think overall the big problem, the big issue will be if we don't educate ourselves enough to understand what is happening, what are the potential threats, and how we can work around it to find solutions. So usually there are those negative people, there are the slow adopters, or the ones that they are very much into the frontiers of what's happening. So, you have to pick who you are and what you want to do. And in the future, people will have like an opportunity to get more training over their career. And this is where now we are at the point that we think that whatever we have done before historically will not be applied in the near future because of new technologies, which is not exactly that, but we do need further development, and that has to match the productivity due to AI. Because if these two do not match, then we will have different levels of people understanding what's going on. And when I say people, I mean even engineers designing those cities, right? Everybody involved in the urban environment, from the citizens and the users all the way up to the engineers. So we need to create a sort of like a need for a socialism, if you like, into our world, where this information is shared, everybody understands, everybody's at the same level, so that we can communicate and we can improve the processes and the practices.
Brilliant final point. With that, I'm just going to quickly flash up what we've got coming up the next few months. In September, we're going to be talking about the political implications of AI, so the influences of that on the 2024 elections, including sort of geopolitical issues such as chip wars. And we've got Andreas Samados from Oxford University, just completing his PhD, and Duncan Clark from APD Social Infrastructure. But we do require an ECP, so if something sounds like that's your cup of tea or you're interested in that, please give me an email and we'll get you involved. And then in October, we're going to be talking about the digital skills divide, so mid-career professional skills gaps, as Kostas was just talking about. And do you need to be a tech guru to work in tech? Probably not, but sort of there's lots of discussion points around that too. So I just want to say thank you so much to Celine and Kostas for that really, really interesting and insightful discussion. I hope this is the start of a really gorgeous series where you'll have lots of interesting chats on Fridays. And yeah, thank you so much, all of you, for joining. Great, thank you.